On a biting November morning in 1944, a convoy of olive-drab American military trucks rolled through the gates of a small prisoner-of-war camp near Fort Deans, Massachusetts. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the distant hum of machinery, a stark contrast to the war-ravaged landscapes of Europe. Inside the truck sat 60 German women, members of the Women's Auxiliary Corps, captured during the chaotic retreats in France and Belgium. Their gray uniforms, patched and faded, still bore the eagle and swastika insignia of the Reich, symbols they had once worn with pride. Among them was Ingrid Brenner, a 23-year-old communications specialist from Hamburg, her hands tightly gripping a small leather diary that held her thoughts, fears, and fading connection to a homeland she barely recognized. These women, trained to serve the Wehrmacht with unwavering loyalty, were about to confront a reality that would unravel their understanding of their enemy, the staggering might and unexpected humanity of the U.S. military. Ingrid's first glimpse of the camp was a shock. She had expected a grim makeshift prison, like the ones whispered about in Germany, barren, cold, and unforgiving. Instead, she saw rows of sturdy barracks, a mess hall emitting the aroma of fresh bread, and a small library stocked with books and newspapers. American soldiers moved with a casual confidence, their uniforms crisp, their equipment gleaming. The camp was a microcosm of American efficiency, a testament to a nation untouched by the devastation that had gutted Europe. Ingrid scribbled in her diary that night, "It can't be real. They have everything, meat, potatoes, even coffee, as if war doesn't touch them. How can they have so much when we had so little?" The women, aged 18 to 35, had served as radio operators, nurses, and administrative clerks, believing their work propped up a faltering Germany. Now, standing on American soil, they faced a new kind of power. Captain Margaret Sullivan, one of the few female officers in the U.S. Army and the camp's overseer, observed the prisoners as they disembarked. Their faces were a mix of defiance and bewilderment, their eyes darting to the abundance around them. Blankets piled high, medical supplies neatly stacked, and trucks that seemed to multiply by the day. Anna Weber, a slight blonde with a persistent cough, leaned toward Ingrid and whispered, "Look at their machines. Radios, trucks, even their typewriters, they work like clockwork. Our army was scavenging for parts." Her voice trembled, unable to bridge the gap between the Reich's propaganda and this undeniable display of strength. The early days in the camp were marked by a brittle tension. The women clung to their military discipline, standing ramrod straight during roll calls, speaking only in hushed German during meals. They avoided eye contact with the American guards, expecting the cruelty they'd been taught to anticipate. But the U.S. military's power wasn't just in its resources, it was in the way it was wielded. Private James Morrison, a lanky 19-year-old from an Iowa farm, noticed Anna's cough growing worse. One chilly evening, he approached her with a thick wool blanket and a tin cup of steaming herbal tea, brewed from recipes his grandmother swore by. "For the cough," he muttered, his cheeks reddening as he avoided her gaze. Anna, raised on tales of American brutality, froze. Her blue eyes widened, searching for a trick. Finding none, she murmured, "Danke," her voice barely audible. Ingrid, watching from across the mess hall, wrote, "Why would an enemy care? This boy, younger than my brother, sees her as a person, not a prisoner." That small act of kindness was a crack in the wall of distrust. Guard Sergeant Robert Chen, whose Chinese immigrant parents had faced suspicion in their adopted country, understood what it meant to be an outsider. He began teaching English to any prisoner willing to learn, sketching words like bread and friend on scraps of paper when language failed. Ingrid, who had studied English in school, found herself drawn to these lessons. Her aptitude for languages blossomed, and she began translating for the others, her curiosity about the Americans growing. She noticed their endless supplies, cans of peaches, bars of soap, even pencils in abundance, details that spoke of a nation with resources Germany could only dream of. But more striking was how the Americans shared these things. The camp's kitchen served hot meals daily, roast beef, mashed potatoes, and apple pie, foods the women hadn't tasted in years. Ingrid wrote, "They don't hoard their wealth. They give it freely, even to us." As autumn turned to winter, the women's awe deepened. They watched American jeeps roll in with supplies, their engines purring smoothly, unlike the sputtering vehicles of the Wehrmacht. The camp's radio crackled with news of Allied victories, delivered with a clarity that German equipment rarely achieved. But it was the human moments that began to shift their perspective. Maria Gottschalk, a former clerk, marveled at the camp's record-keeping system, organized with typewriters and carbon paper that never seemed to run out. Greta Hoffman, who had repaired radios in Belgium, stared at the camp's generator, a humming beast that powered lights and heaters without fail. "Our equipment broke every week," she told Ingrid. "Here, everything works. It's like they've conquered chaos itself." Christmas 1944 became a turning point. Captain Sullivan, sensing the women's homesickness, decided to organize a modest celebration. She allowed them to craft decorations from paper, string, and pine branches gathered from the camp's perimeter. Ingrid, emboldened by her growing English skills, approached Sullivan with a nervous request. "Captain, may we sing German Christmas songs and try some American ones?" Sullivan, her stern face softening, nodded. That evening, in the camp's drafty main hall, the 60 women stood before their captors, their voices rising in O Tannenbaum, the melody weaving through the room with haunting precision. Then, with hesitant glances, they attempted Silent Night in English, their accents thick but their effort unmistakable. The American guards, many hardened by war, stood motionless, some wiping their eyes. Private Morrison wrote to his family, "Ma, those German girls sang our song tonight and it hit me hard. They're so young, so far from home, like Sarah and her friends back in Cedar Rapids. I forgot we were enemies for a moment." The women's perception of American power began to shift from material might to something deeper. They saw it in the guards' restraint, in Sullivan's fairness, in the way the camp operated like a small, self-sufficient city. But it was the arrival of devastating news in February 1945 that shattered their world entirely. American newspapers, available in the camp's library, began reporting on the liberation of concentration camps, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, places the women had never heard of. Ingrid sat with Anna, their hands trembling as they read descriptions of skeletal survivors and mass graves. The grainy photographs were undeniable. "It can't be real," Anna whispered, tears streaming down her face. Did our country do this?" Maria joined them, her voice breaking. "We thought we were defending Germany. What were we defending?" Ingrid's diary captured her despair. "I served a lie. I thought I knew Germany, but I know nothing. What is left of the country I loved?" The revelation forced the women to confront their past. They weren't ideologues, but young women who had joined the auxiliary corps out of duty or necessity. Now they grappled with guilt and confusion, their awe of American power now tinged with shame at their own nation's actions. Captain Sullivan watched from a distance, noting the anguish on their faces. She had seen similar reactions among male POWs, but the women's raw vulnerability was different. They weren't just prisoners. They were young women redefining their entire sense of self. As spring 1945 brought victory in Europe Day on May 8th, the camp buzzed with celebration. Church bells rang in nearby towns, and American flags fluttered in the breeze. But for the German women, the end of the war brought a new uncertainty. Repatriation loomed, and reports from Germany painted a grim picture: cities reduced to rubble, families scattered or dead, and a nation grappling with its own guilt. Many of the women, including Ingrid, had lost contact with their families months or years earlier. The Germany they had known was gone, replaced by chaos and judgment. Life in the camp, meanwhile, had transformed into something unexpected. The women no longer sat apart during meals. Conversations in broken English and German filled the air. Sergeant Chen's language classes had grown into cultural exchanges, with the women teaching German phrases in return. Ingrid had become an unofficial translator, mediating between prisoners and staff, her diary now filled with reflections on the Americans' kindness. Anna, working with the camp's medical officer, Dr. Robert Hayes, discovered a talent for nursing, her gentle demeanor earning his respect. Even the local community began to engage, with families like the Hendersons, led by schoolteacher Mrs. Henderson, visiting as part of a church outreach program. Mrs. Henderson was struck by Ingrid's intelligence and remorse, telling her, "You're not responsible for what you didn't know. What matters is what you do now." On May 15, 1945, Captain Sullivan called a general assembly to announce repatriation procedures. The women gathered in the main hall, their faces a mix of relief and dread. Sullivan's voice was steady but compassionate. "Ladies, you will be processed for return to Germany within 2 weeks. You'll pass through displaced persons camps in Europe before reaching your homes." The words hung heavy. Then Ingrid stood, her hands shaking but her voice clear. "Captain Sullivan, may I speak? Some of us, we don't wish to return to Germany." Anna rose next, followed by 12 others, their faces resolute. Anna's halting English carried their shared conviction. "Germany isn't our home anymore. We served a country we didn't understand. Here, we've seen what power can be, strength that builds, not destroys." The request stunned the room. American guards exchanged glances, and Sullivan's composure faltered. In her years of service, she had never heard of prisoners refusing freedom. The women explained their reasoning. Germany was a wasteland, their families likely gone, and the shame of their nation's actions weighed heavily. But more than that, they had found something in America: dignity, purpose, and a chance to be better. Ingrid spoke of the kindness they'd experienced, from Morrison's tea to Chen's lessons. "You showed us what humanity looks like," she said. "We want to stay and prove we can be part of it." The War Department's response was slow, leaving the camp in limbo. The women who chose to stay threw themselves into their roles. Ingrid translating, Anna assisting in the infirmary, Maria streamlining records, Greta fixing equipment. Their efforts weren't just to prove their worth. They had found meaning in contributing to the camp's community. Meanwhile, local reactions were mixed. Some newspapers decried special treatment for Nazi prisoners, while church groups, moved by the women's transformation, offered support. Mrs. Henderson rallied locals, arguing, "These aren't the same women who arrived here. They've changed, and we should give them a chance." An unexpected visitor, Father Hinrich Müller, a German-American priest from Worcester, arrived to counsel the women. Speaking in their native tongue, he challenged them to consider their duty. "You've found kindness here," he said. "But what about the kindness Germany needs? Your country is broken. Who will rebuild it if not you?" His words sparked heated debates. Some women wavered, wondering if staying was cowardice. Ingrid wrote, "Am I running from my past or choosing a future where I can do good?" Ultimately, 9 women, including Ingrid and Anna, held firm, while 5 chose repatriation. Washington's response came in June. The women could apply for displaced person status, requiring sponsors and jobs. It was a daunting prospect, but the Hendersons offered to house Ingrid, and Dr. Hayes secured Anna a hospital position. Other families stepped forward, inspired by the women's sincerity. On June 20, 1945, the repatriation day arrived, not as a cold military procedure, but as a community farewell. The 46 women returning to Germany stood in softened formation, carrying letters, photos, and gifts from their American friends. Sullivan addressed them, her voice thick with emotion. "You came as enemies, but you leave as friends. Remember that America can show mercy without forgetting justice." Ingrid, now the voice of those staying, responded, "We thought we knew America. We were wrong. The real enemy was our own ignorance. You gave us a chance to change." Tears fell as the trucks departed for Boston's port, but they were tears of hope. The 9 women who stayed built new lives, Ingrid as a State Department translator, Anna as a nurse, others in teaching, social work, or families with American soldiers. Those who returned to Germany became advocates for reconciliation, their stories of American kindness shaping German-American ties. In 1970, Ingrid Brainer Henderson, now an American citizen, stood before the United Nations, her diary in hand. We saw America's power, its machines, its food, its people. But its true strength is in giving second chances. We learned that home is where you choose to live with dignity. Anna, now Dr. Anna Weber, visited Germany in 1965, marveling at its rebirth, her own transformation mirroring her country's. The women of Fort Deans, once speechless before America's might, had found their voices, proving that even in war's darkest shadow, humanity could build a brighter future.